The morning sun had barely crested over the horizon when Collins stepped onto the sprawling training grounds of the Navy SEAL compound. Mist hovered low over the sand and surf, swirling in the cold dawn air. Her boots sank slightly into the damp earth as she walked with purposeful calm, her eyes scanning the faces of new recruits assembled for orientation. Among them, one figure stood out, not for his posture or poise, but for his arrogance. Mitchell. He was the type that smiled too easily, laughed too loudly, and underestimated everyone who didn't resemble him. Had already heard the rumors, the whispers in the hallway, the sideways glances, the faint sneers masked as jokes. Women don't belong here. It didn't matter. She had faced far worse in the shadows of war zones where life and death were decided not by gender, but by skill, patience, and nerve. Here, in the sanitized glare of a Navy training base, she would prove the same truth again. Mitchell's voice cut through the chilly air like a blade. "Women can't be SEALs," he barked, loud enough for the circle around him to hear. A few recruits chuckled, the laugh awkward but eager to belong. Grinned, his chest puffing out as if the joke itself granted him authority. His lips twitched into a faint, imperceptible smile. She said nothing. Silence had power, a quiet confidence that roared louder than any boast. Around her, instructors exchanged glances. They had seen plenty of candidates come through these gates, but was different. The files on her were heavily redacted, the missions she had survived and dominated classified at the highest levels. Very few within the SEAL community even knew her real accomplishments. Of course, knew nothing, and that ignorance made his arrogance all the more dangerous for him. The training instructors, hardened men and women who had endured battles both abroad and within the grueling SEAL pipeline, watched with quiet amusement. They didn't intervene, letting the young recruit continue to prove his ignorance. In the right moment, they would let the truth speak louder than any taunt. Took a step closer to, puffing up as if proximity could somehow intimidate her. "I mean, seriously," he said, louder still, "what makes you think you can survive what we're about to go through?" His eyes, steel gray and unwavering, met his. In those few seconds she could have told him everything, about the high mountains of Afghanistan where a single mistake could cost lives, about nights spent crawling through enemy territory, about a sniper rifle and a single breath that had decided the fate of dozens. But she didn't. Not yet. Silence was more dangerous than words. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, the faintest curve of a smile on her lips, as if amused by the futility of his bravado. That smile unnerved him in a way he couldn't articulate. He was used to being in control, to being the loudest presence in any room. For the first time, he felt the fragile doubt creep into the edges of his confidence. Around them, the other recruits shifted uncomfortably. A few whispered to each other, catching on to the tension. It wasn't just a man making a joke at the expense of a woman. Something was different about this quiet, composed candidate standing so still, so poised, with a calm that bordered on predatory. The instructors knew. Some of them had seen the operational reports. Some had heard rumors. Collins wasn't just a recruit. She was a force in waiting, an invisible storm masked by ordinary appearance. The morning continued with the standard introduction to the training schedule: ocean swims, obstacle courses, endurance runs, and combat drills. Moved with effortless grace, her body honed by years of covert operations, her mind a well-oiled machine capable of processing stress, fatigue, and strategy in real time. Watched, still unconvinced, as she outperformed nearly every man in the group. Every move precise, calculated, and powerful. Every glance calm, measuring, assessing. He tried to dismiss it, tried to convince himself it was luck, that she was just a one-time wonder. But as the minutes stretched into hours, he began to feel the subtle shift in the room. Other recruits were watching her, following her lead without even realizing it. It wasn't her size or her gender that impressed them. It was the unmistakable aura of someone who had survived impossible odds, someone who had stared death in the face and walked away with the lessons etched into muscle memory. During a break by the ocean, muttered under his breath, loud enough for to hear, "You're going to crack under pressure." Everyone does. She turned to him, her gaze steady, almost piercing. Pressure isn't something I crack under, she said quietly, her voice calm but carrying weight. It's something I use to sharpen myself. The words struck him like a slap. There was no arrogance, no need to shout or boast, just certainty and a quiet confidence that radiated from every inch of her being. Laughed nervously, trying to mask the discomfort. But inside, doubt gnawed at him. He had mocked women in training before, yes, but never someone who radiated danger in such a silent, controlled way. Didn't wait for him to process it. She turned her focus back to the ocean, scanning the horizon with the calm precision of someone who had spent countless hours observing threats from miles away. The other recruits followed suit, taking cues from her posture, her attention to detail, and her unwavering composure. The instructors gathered the recruits for the first physical evaluation, and the atmosphere grew tense. Lined up, her body relaxed yet coiled like a spring. Two took his place, chest out, smirking to maintain appearances. The whistle blew and they began the swim test. Moved through the water with grace and power, cutting through the surf effortlessly. Struggled to keep up, his ego bruised with every stroke. By the time they reached the shore, the instructors were nodding appreciatively. Had finished first, not just completing the test but dominating it. Stumbled onto the sand, coughing and sputtering, his face red with effort and humiliation. Around him, the quiet murmur of respect began to spread among the recruits. Tried one last jab. Lucky shot, he muttered, ignoring the fact that this wasn't a battlefield with any luck involved. Merely smiled faintly, drying her hair with the towel she had brought along. She didn't argue, didn't explain. Actions spoke louder than words, and she had just demonstrated exactly what she was capable of. As the day ended, walked back to the barracks with the same quiet composure, leaving Starring after her, speechless. The sun had climbed higher, warming the sand, but the chill of the morning's lesson remained. In that brief encounter, the first cracks had formed in his arrogance. He didn't know it yet, but the woman he had laughed at would change everything he thought he knew about strength, skill, and survival. And she simply walked on, carrying the silent weight of her past victories and the unspoken knowledge that this was only the beginning. Long before Colin stepped onto the Navy SEAL training grounds, she had lived a life that very few could imagine. Her story began not with accolades or recognition, but with the quiet forging of skill, discipline, and lethal precision. Grew up in a military family, where discipline was the foundation of existence. Her father, a retired Army Ranger, had taught her how to read the wind, the land, and people. Her mother, a former intelligence analyst, had instilled in her the value of patience, observation, and timing. By the time was a teenager, she could hit targets at ranges most adults could not even dream of attempting. After high school, joined the Army and quickly distinguished herself in marksmanship competitions. Her instructors noticed her uncanny ability to remain calm under extreme pressure and her meticulous attention to detail. She could read a situation before anyone else and make the perfect decision in a fraction of a second. That talent caught the attention of a highly classified joint task force. They recruited her into a sniper unit that operated in the shadows, conducting missions that were never spoken of, missions that left no trace but achieved results few could fathom. Her first deployment was in the mountains of Afghanistan, where her unit was tasked with overwatch missions to protect forward operating bases and aid convoys. From hidden perches on rocky crags, watched over her fellow soldiers with a predator's patience. She observed insurgent movements, calculated trajectories, and neutralized threats before anyone even knew they existed. One mission in particular cemented her reputation. She prevented an ambush that could have killed an entire company. With her calm precision, 3 hostile combatants were neutralized, her team remained untouched, and the mission succeeded flawlessly. Yet no one spoke of it outside the unit. The operation was classified, erased from public records, and left to carry the knowledge in silence. Over the years, her assignments became more complex and dangerous. Operated in Syria, monitoring high-risk urban zones, often under fire, often in situations where a single miscalculation meant death. Civilians sometimes unknowingly walked through the chaos she navigated daily. Her decisions had to be perfect, not just to survive, but to protect innocent lives. Her confirmed kills began to mount, reaching numbers that would shock anyone outside the inner circles of covert operations. Yet despite her achievements, recognition never came. Her job was never to be celebrated, only to be effective. She carried the weight of lives saved and lost silently, letting the precision of her actions speak for her. This wasn't only in marksmanship. She became adept in reconnaissance, close-quarter combat, tactical strategy, and survival in extreme conditions. Her mind processed danger and variables at speeds few could match. Her body endured fatigue, stress, and injury with a discipline honed over years. She was, in every sense, the embodiment of a warrior forged in shadows. But the life of secrecy came with a personal cost. Friendships were fleeting, relationships strained, and moments of vulnerability were rare. Learn to mask her emotions, to project calm and composure even when terror or grief gripped her heart. She had seen comrades die under her watch, and she had carried the burden of their absence like a stone in her chest. Yet she did not let it weaken her. Every mission, every risk, every success and failure shaped her into someone the world would never fully know, until now. Eventually, her unit was disbanded due to shifting strategic priorities. Many of her peers were reassigned or retired, however, was not ready to leave She requested a transfer to the Navy, driven by a lifelong ambition to join the SEALs. She had watched SEALs operate from afar, admired their discipline, their versatility, their reputation for excellence in the harshest environments. To her, joining their ranks wasn't a desire for glory. It was a challenge, an opportunity to push herself further, and a chance to break through barriers still imposed by outdated assumptions about gender and capability. Arriving at the SEAL compound carried all this history in silence. No one outside a handful of instructors knew the full extent of her experience. Her reputation was invisible, hidden behind classified files and the absence of public acknowledgement. Yet, the precision, discipline, and quiet authority she exuded hinted at a past too deep for casual mockery. As she trained alongside Mitchell and the other recruits, his past gave her an edge. Where others hesitated, she acted. Where others panicked under fatigue, she remained calm. Every exercise, from obstacle courses to simulated combat drills, was approached with a strategic mind honed in the crucible of real warfare. Still attempting to assert his superiority, began to notice something unsettling. This woman, whom he had laughed at, moved with a confidence that no novice could fake. In small moments, an adjustment of gear, a calculated dive into cold surf, a precise throw of a weighted object, demonstrated instincts born of countless life-or-death scenarios. Other recruits began to sense it too, though they did not yet understand the source. Whispered glances and quiet acknowledgments spread across the training ground. Did not seek recognition. She simply continued to excel, her history an invisible shield and weapon. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows across the compound, stood alone by the water, reflecting on her journey. The missions she had survived, the lives she had protected, and the solitude she had endured all converged into a single thought. Every challenge ahead in SEAL training would be a test, but none would be new. She had faced worse. She had seen death in its form, navigated chaos with clarity, and emerged stronger each time. Back in the barracks, continued to mock, unaware that his jokes were echoes bouncing off the walls of someone who had stared down far greater dangers. The knowledge of his past was locked behind sealed files, classified reports, and operational silence. He had no concept of her experience, her skill, or her lethal efficiency. But the universe has a way of revealing truths in its own time, and his moment of realization would come soon enough. That night lay awake, preparing mentally for the grueling days ahead. The physical challenges of SEAL training were significant, but the real test was mental endurance, the ability to remain composed, confident, and strategic under stress. She had trained her body in the field, but now she would train it in a new arena, alongside men and women who had not witnessed what she had, and against a culture that still underestimated her because of her gender. In silence, made a promise to herself. She would not just survive SEAL training. She would dominate it, not for recognition but to prove a simple truth. Ability transcends gender, experience speaks louder than mockery, and a warrior's worth is measured by actions, not assumptions. She had spent years in the shadows. Now it was time to step into the light on her own terms and on her own power. The next morning, Mitchell would laugh again, still unaware of the storm he had just teased, but would remain undisturbed, ready to face him and everyone else, with the calm certainty of someone who had already conquered far greater challenges. The day had been waiting for had arrived, the start of actual SEAL training. The compound buzzed with nervous energy as recruits lined up for their first grueling exercises. The air was thick with sweat, salt, and tension. Mitchell, still full of bravado, strode in confidently, a smug grin plastered across his face. "Hope you're ready to get crushed," he muttered too, loud enough for her to hear. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Actions, not words, were her language. The instructors, veterans of countless missions, observed the recruits with sharp eyes. They knew that the first days were as much about mental endurance as physical strength. However, was already mentally armored. Her years in covert operations had taught her how to thrive under stress, how to think 3 steps ahead while fatigue and fear clouded the minds of others. The first exercise was the obstacle course, a brutal sequence of climbing walls, balancing beams, rope swings, and tire runs designed to push recruits to their limits. Moved through it with almost effortless precision, each step calculated, each movement efficient. On the other hand, struggled, his confidence waning as he stumbled over a rope swing and nearly fell from a high beam. Around him, other recruits whispered and nudged each other. For the first time, felt the sting of doubt. He had mocked ability, yet here she was, leaving him behind with apparent ease. Next came the endurance swim in the choppy surf. The instructors blew whistles as icy waves crashed against the recruits, testing their stamina and resolve. Cut through the water like a predator, steady, rhythmic, and deliberate. Every stroke was a study in efficiency, every breath measured against exhaustion. Flailed, splashing and gasping, struggling to match her pace. His frustration grew. He had prided himself on strength and speed, yet he found himself dwarfed by the quiet mastery of someone he had once thought inferior. Throughout the day, his presence became magnetic. The other recruits, initially skeptical of her abilities due to her gender, started observing her closely. They noticed the subtle strategies she employed, how she calculated angles before climbing, how she adjusted her breathing to maximize endurance, and how she maintained calm in situations that caused panic in others. Her skill wasn't just physical, it was mental, a combination that made her nearly untouchable in these early tests. By midday, the instructors introduced team exercises designed to simulate real-world mission stress. Recruits were paired for tactical drills requiring cooperation, communication, and precision. Found himself reluctantly paired with. At first, he attempted to assert dominance, barking orders he hoped she would follow. She didn't. Instead, she calmly took the lead when necessary, guiding their actions with quiet authority. Her experience was evident in every decision, timing, movement, and awareness. Was forced to follow, learning in real time that arrogance without understanding was useless. During a particularly grueling drill, recruits had to navigate a complex obstacle while carrying weighted packs across uneven terrain. Struggled under the load, muscles screaming, sweat stinging his eyes. Adjusted her pace slightly, allowing him to keep up without slowing their progress. She offered no words of encouragement, no patronizing remarks, just steady, unflinching guidance. For it was humbling. He realized that her strength wasn't just about raw power. It was intelligence, strategy, and experience fused into motion. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the recruits faced the final challenge of the day. An extended endurance march through mud, sand, and rocks, designed to break both body and spirit. Many recruits faltered early, some crying out in exhaustion, others quietly collapsing under the weight of fatigue. However, maintained an unwavering pace, her body a machine honed by years of covert operations. Her breathing was controlled, her steps calculated, and her mind entirely focused on completion rather than recognition. His ego had long since shattered under the dual forces of exhaustion and awe. He had mocked her hours ago, confident in his own physical superiority, yet now he struggled to keep up. Each step reminded him of the countless times he had underestimated others, blinded by arrogance. His quiet confidence had become an unspoken lesson. Mastery isn't flashy, and true strength often appears deceptively calm. During a brief water break, one of the instructors, Sergeant, watched the duo with interest. "Notice anything?" he asked another instructor, nodding toward. "She's not just surviving. She's dominating every challenge without wasting energy. That's the difference between a recruit and an operator." His words carried weight, for he knew that in the SEAL pipeline, mental resilience often mattered more than physical skill, had both in abundance. As night fell, the recruits were gathered for debriefing. Sat silently, his mind racing. He had expected to outperform, perhaps even embarrass her, yet she had consistently exceeded his expectations. Her calm precision, strategic thinking, and unshakable endurance had left him everything he believed about women in combat and about himself. For the first time, he questioned his assumptions, realizing that mocking someone he didn't understand had been foolish. Meanwhile, reflected quietly, she had navigated the first day with minimal effort relative to what she had endured in actual combat. The physical exercises were challenging, yes, but manageable. The real challenge would be mental endurance, the unrelenting pressure of performing flawlessly under fatigue, stress, and observation. She welcomed it. For her, every obstacle was an opportunity to sharpen her body, mind, and spirit. By the time the recruits were dismissed to the barracks, had become acutely aware of something he couldn't yet articulate. Collins was different. Not just skilled, not just strong, but dangerous in a way he had never encountered. She was the kind of recruit who didn't just meet challenges. She anticipated them, mastered them, and moved beyond them, leaving others to catch up. And though he didn't yet respect her fully, he knew that his mockery had already backfired, replaced by begrudging admiration and a hint of fear. That night, as lay on her bunk, she reviewed the day mentally. Every movement, every decision, every interaction was cataloged, analyzed, and noted for improvement. Her past experience had taught her that preparation and reflection were as critical as execution. She knew the challenges ahead would escalate. Hell Week, advanced tactical drills, and real-world simulations. But she also knew that her strength, honed in the shadows of classified missions and life-or-death scenarios, would carry her through. In the darkness, stared at the ceiling of his bunk, replaying the day over and over. He couldn't stop thinking about how effortlessly had dominated the obstacles, how she had guided their team, and how calm she had remained under pressure. Doubt, something he had rarely felt in life, settled over him like a cold fog. The mocking laughter from that morning seemed distant and foolish. Wasn't just capable, she was exceptional, and for the first time realized that he had underestimated her completely. By dawn, the first day of training had passed, leaving in its wake fatigue, reflection, and a subtle shift in dynamics. Had proven herself without fanfare. Had learned humility the hard way. And the other recruits, quietly observing, began to recognize that true skill could not be judged by appearances or assumptions. In the weeks to come, Collins would continue to redefine what it meant to be a SEAL candidate, one precise, unyielding, and silent step at a time. Hell Week arrived like a thunderstorm, ruthless and unforgiving. The early morning air was thick with cold and salt as the recruits assembled on the beach before dawn. Waves crashed violently against the shore, freezing and relentless, mirroring the brutality of the week ahead. Collins adjusted her wet gear, calm as always, scanning the recruits with sharp, calculating eyes. Mitchell, however, looked like a man who had just glimpsed the gates of hell and feared he might not survive. The instructors wasted no time. "Welcome to Hell Week," Sergeant barked, his voice cutting across the surf. This is where men are tested. This is where women are tested. This is where all pretenders fall away. The words struck the recruits like steel. For the next 6 days, sleep, food, and comfort would become luxuries of the past. Only endurance, grit, and willpower would remain. The first exercise began immediately. Log carries across the wet, jagged sand. Recruits paired up, gripping massive wooden logs above their shoulders as they trudged through crashing waves. Was paired with. Initially, he tried to assert dominance, barking orders she didn't need. Said nothing, her calm energy a stark contrast to his flailing frustration. Step by step, she carried not just the log but the silent weight of experience. Hours passed like an eternity. Blisters formed, muscles burned, and exhaustion gnawed at every recruit. Some cried, some dropped out, but moved steadily, her pace unwavering. Faltered, gasping for breath, but subtly shifted her stance to balance the log, keeping them both upright without slowing down. She didn't speak, she didn't scold. She simply led through action, a living example of endurance under pressure. By the third day, sleep deprivation had taken its toll. The recruits were subjected to continuous drills, surf torture, obstacle courses in the dark, endless runs across uneven terrain. Many rang out, unable to endure the physical and mental strain, struggled to stay conscious, his body trembling from fatigue. Every step, every wave, every drop of sand in his eyes seemed designed to break him, yet remained serene, moving with a rhythm born of years surviving far worse. During a particularly brutal night exercise, the recruits were tasked with crawling through mud and shallow water for hours. His body shook uncontrollably, his mind teetering on the edge of panic. Sensing his weakness, shifted slightly and placed a hand on his back, not to reprimand but to stabilize. He looked up, confusion mixing with a reluctant recognition. For the first time, he realized that she didn't just endure hell weak. She dominated it without struggle, every movement precise and controlled. Instructors watched silently, impressed but not surprised. Had always been exceptional, but the intensity of Hell Week revealed more than physical prowess. It revealed leadership, patience, and the ability to inspire action without speaking a single word. Recruits followed her subconsciously, mimicking her breathing, adjusting their own pace, and finding strength they didn't know they had. Even, stubborn and prideful, began to rely on her without acknowledging it. The mental strain was as punishing as the physical. Recruits were subjected to continuous stress drills, simulations of combat scenarios, and tasks that required split-second decision-making. His mind was a fortress. She observed, calculated, and acted with clarity that made the chaos around her almost irrelevant. Every choice she made was deliberate, every movement intentional. Watched in silent awe, the arrogance that had defined him for years now crumbling with each passing hour. By the 5th day, the psychological intensity peaked. Instructors introduced a simulated ambush scenario. Recruits had to navigate an obstacle-laden course under mock gunfire, with the threat of failure evident in every step. Froze in the first wave of chaos, paralyzed by indecision. Calm as ever, moved toward him, physically guiding him through the most dangerous sections, covering his errors with flawless execution. She didn't chastise him, she simply ensured the mission succeeded. For this act of unspoken mentorship shattered his last remnants of ego. As exhaustion pushed everyone to the brink, began to stand out not just as a participant but as a silent anchor. Her presence gave others the confidence to endure. Recruits who would have quit pressed on. For the first time, felt the weight of humility. The woman he had mocked at orientation was now the standard, the benchmark he couldn't reach with arrogance alone. The final night of Hell Week was a grueling combination of ocean swims, obstacle navigation, and continuous log carries under the coldest conditions. Many recruits collapsed in the surf, their bodies failing before their will could. Pressed on, muscles screaming, yet her composure remained intact. Strength waned, but she adjusted her pace, subtly guiding him to finish alongside her. Together they crossed the finish line, not in triumph, but in the solemn acknowledgement of survival. When the whistle finally blew, marking the end of Hell Week, the instructors gathered the remaining recruits. Silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by labored breathing. Sergeant looked over the group and nodded toward. "Some of you will learn today," he said, his voice low but firm, "that the true measure of an operator isn't physical strength, ego, or gender. It's resilience, precision, and calm under fire. Take notes." Stared at, unable to articulate what he felt. Respect. Awe, something closer to fear. She had endured every challenge without complaint, without panic, and without ego. She had guided him, mentored him silently, and completed every task with near perfection. For the first time, he recognized the truth. Mocking someone before knowing them is a dangerous mistake. This experience had transformed her into something beyond ordinary comprehension, a living embodiment of skill, determination, and quiet authority. That night, as recruits lay on their bunks, drenched in sweat and mud, reviewed every moment of Hell Week mentally. Every step, every obstacle, every decision was cataloged, analyzed, and stored for improvement. For her, Hell Week was a proving ground, yes, but not the ultimate challenge. That awaited. The tests to come would require not just endurance, but strategic brilliance, leadership under fire, and the capacity to navigate moral and physical complexity simultaneously. Meanwhile, stared at the ceiling, still grappling with what he had witnessed. Skill, her precision, and her calm had shattered the world he thought he knew. The laughter, the mocking, the assumptions gone. In their place, a sobering realization. She was not just a woman in SEAL training. She was an operator forged by experiences he could scarcely imagine, and he had been foolish to doubt her. When the sun rose on the final day of Hell Week, led the remaining recruits onto the sand, muscles sore, minds exhausted, yet eyes calm and unwavering. She had survived, yes, but more than that, she had led, inspired, and silently dominated every challenge. Beside her, walked with a quiet humility he had never known, his ego replaced by a grudging respect. Hell Week had stripped everyone to their core. And in those moments of raw exhaustion, Collins emerged not just as a survivor, but as a silent force, a standard to which others would unknowingly measure themselves for the rest of the training and beyond. The sun rose over the SEAL compound, casting a pale gold across the sand-streaked training grounds. The survivors of Hell Week shuffled into formation, exhausted, muddy, and silently proud of having endured what so many others had failed. Collins stood among them, her posture unyielding, her expression calm despite the gnawing fatigue in every muscle. She had dominated every exercise, guided others through chaos, and remained composed when even the strongest candidates faltered. Yet, as she looked around at the remnants of the group, one man's face stood out: Mitchell. The cocky recruit who had laughed at her mere days ago now looked uncertain, his ego battered and bruised by the harsh truth of her skill. After a brief debriefing, the instructors called aside. Sensing the tension, remained still, quietly observing, followed Sergeant to a private corner of the training area, unaware that his perspective was about to change irrevocably. Handed him a thin, heavily redacted file, its corners creased from use. "Take a look," the chief said quietly, his tone measured. "Just know this, some truths are dangerous. Handle it carefully." Opened the file, his eyes scanning the redacted lines, the blurred letters, the erased numbers. Most of the content was blacked out, impossible to read, except for one entry that remained intact, stark against the obscured page. Confirmed kills, 309 Collins J. The words hit like a hammer. He blinked, rereading them, hoping it was a mistake. 309 confirmed kills. His laughter from the first day now felt foolish and shameful. He realized with a sinking sensation that the woman he had mocked so openly was not only capable of surviving the grueling SEAL pipeline, but had already faced life-or-death situations that dwarfed anything he had imagined. 309, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. That's impossible." His expression was unreadable. Not impossible, just classified. "You've spent the last week watching her operate, and now you know why she's different. She's not just a recruit. She's a weapon, trained in ways you can't yet comprehend. And she's deadly, not because she wants to be, but because she's survived situations that would destroy most men." Swallowed hard, the arrogance he had carried like armor now crumbling. Every exercise, every obstacle, every grueling endurance test he had witnessed, the calm precision, the uncanny awareness, the ability to guide others silently, made sense. Wasn't simply strong. She was extraordinary, forged in combat, tested by circumstances far harsher than any training drill could emulate. Dangerous? Asked incredulous. You mean she's killed people? Yes, replied, and saved countless more. Each confirmed kill is not a number, it's a mission completed, lives protected, and skill perfected under extreme conditions. She doesn't boast, she doesn't brag, and most of her peers don't even know. But what you've seen over the past week, that's a glimpse, a hint of what she's capable of when stakes are real. His mind reeled. He had mocked her, doubted her, even derided her abilities in front of the class. Every word, every laugh felt like a mark of his ignorance now. He realized the truth he had been blind to. Skill, experience, and composure weren't measured by gender, size, or ego. They were forged in fire and tested in darkness. Embodied all of that, and his assumptions had been naive, even dangerous. Be careful who you underestimate, said, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. Some wars are fought long before you join the team. Some battles don't make the records. You've just learned that the hard way. Nodded slowly, the weight of realization pressing down on him. He felt shame, yes, but also a spark of respect. A grudging acknowledgement that calm, unyielding presence was not merely confidence but earned mastery. He had laughed, but now he understood that laughter was the currency of ignorance, and he had spent it unwisely. Meanwhile, unaware of the private exchange, continued preparing for the next phase of training. She adjusted her gear, checked her weapons, and focused on her breathing. Weeks of training, years of preparation, and decades of discipline had led her to this point. She didn't seek recognition, she didn't need validation. Her skill was a constant, an unshakable truth. The respect, or fear, that would come to feel was irrelevant to her mission. When rejoined the group, something had shifted. He no longer sneered, no longer made jokes at her expense. Instead, he watched her with a newfound attention, analyzing her movements, her decisions, her unwavering focus. The arrogance that had defined him for so long was replaced by humility, and in its place, an earnest desire to learn. Had become, unwittingly, a mentor. The other recruits noticed the change as well. Once brash and condescending, now moved with cautious respect. The dynamic in the group began to shift subtly. Didn't need to assert dominance, her actions had done it for her. She had survived, led, and silently taught without a single word. And now, thanks to his revelations, perception of her, and of the limits he had imposed on himself, was permanently altered. Later that day, the instructors gathered the recruits for a lecture on strategy, teamwork, and resilience. His example was frequently referenced, not by name, of course, but by actions. Calm under pressure, precision in execution, and unwavering focus on mission objectives became the lesson of the hour. Recruits absorbed the lesson differently depending on their experience, but all understood one truth: skill and preparation transcended ego, assumption, and preconception. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with deep reds and purples, approached quietly. He didn't speak at first, merely standing beside her, observing the horizon. Finally, he murmured, I had no idea. Glanced at him, a faint, knowing smile crossing her face. She didn't respond immediately, letting the silence speak. Understood. He had glimpsed just a fraction of her past, the weight of experience that shaped every step she took, every decision she made, and every movement she executed. Words were unnecessary. Respect had been earned in ways far beyond conversation. That night, as the recruits settled into their bunks, reflected on everything he had witnessed. He had mocked, doubted, and underestimated. He had laughed at her, certain of superiority, and yet, in the span of days, had dismantled his assumptions with calm authority and unyielding skill. For the first time, he questioned not only his views on women in combat but also his understanding of true excellence. Meanwhile, remained focused, preparing herself mentally for the challenges ahead. The revelation of her past, while it might have shaken some, did not alter her approach. Her mission was the same: endure, excel, and lead when necessary. Recognition was irrelevant, performance was paramount. She had spent years mastering life-and-death situations that left no mark on the world, and now she faced a different battlefield, one of perception, respect, and proving capability in the public eye of her peers. In the quiet hours before dawn, the camp was silent except for the distant crash of waves. Lay awake, mentally reviewing every moment of the day, cataloging movements, adjusting strategies, and anticipating the next stage of training. Her mind was a fortress of focus, her body weary but ready. She understood that the revelation had not only changed perception, but also subtly shifted the dynamic of the entire class. Her presence was now both inspiration and challenge, a quiet benchmark no one could ignore. For the revelation was a turning point. He no longer saw as a rival, an annoyance, or a subject for ridicule. He now saw a master operator, a living testament to skill, discipline, and resilience forged through fire. The lessons he had ignored in the classroom and mockery would now guide his own approach to training. And for the first time, he felt the desire not to compete with her ego, but to learn from her experience, to match her skill with humility and dedication. Hell Week had tested bodies and minds, but the instructor's revelation tested perceptions, assumptions, and the very limits of belief. Had endured both, silently and flawlessly. She had survived the trials of endurance and now commanded respect through truth, proof of skill, action, and the undeniable weight of experience. As the camp settled for the night, the lesson lingered. Underestimating Collins was not merely foolish, it was dangerous. The following morning, a chill lingered over the SEAL training compound. The survivors of Hell Week, muscles screaming, lungs burning, and minds stretched to their limits, were assembled for a new challenge. This phase of training focused not on individual endurance but on trust, team cohesion under pressure, where a single misstep could mean failure or injury. Collins, as always, moved with calm precision, scanning the recruits, noting weaknesses, strengths, and subtle dynamics. Mitchell, now humbled by the revelation of her past and the events of Hell Week, found himself reluctantly paired with her for the first trust-based exercise. The scenario was deceptively simple: a simulated nighttime extraction mission in a dense coastal forest. Recruits had to navigate through difficult terrain, avoid enemy detection, and extract a mock target safely. Each pair relied on communication, coordination, and mutual trust. Past experience in real-life missions, covert operations under fire, ambushes in hostile territory, gave her an immediate edge. She didn't just execute, she planned, anticipating threats and calculating contingencies in real time. On the other hand was tense. His muscles were still recovering from Hell Week, and his ego had been replaced by self-doubt. Every step he took was cautious, every move weighed against potential mistakes. Noticed immediately, adjusting her pace to match his without slowing their progress. She didn't lecture or chastise. Instead, she used subtle guidance, hand gestures, directional taps, and calculated pauses to direct their movement and keep them coordinated. For it was humbling. He realized that leadership and skill were not loud proclamations, but silent control and precise execution. As they moved through the forest, simulated gunfire cracked in the distance. Recruits fell into the dirt, hearts racing, adrenaline spiking, froze at the sound of a sudden enemy movement ahead. His hand shot out, steadying him, whispering calm instructions through clenched teeth. Move left, follow my steps, trust me. It wasn't condescending, it wasn't patronizing. It was the voice of someone who had survived scenarios where hesitation meant death. Followed step by step, every instinct in awe of her composure. They reached the extraction point only to find another obstacle, a narrow, swaying rope bridge over a simulated river, shaking violently in the wind and surf. Many recruits had fallen in earlier trials. Stomach knotted as he faced it. Stepped forward first, her movements fluid and deliberate, testing each plank with precision. She extended a hand, signaling for him to cross. Hesitated. He wanted to argue, to complain, to find excuses, but he remembered the 309 confirmed kills, the calm dominance, and the silent authority of Collins. He trusted her instinctively, taking her hand, moving step by step across the treacherous span. Halfway across, a sudden gust rocked the bridge. Nearly lost his balance. His grip tightened, steadying him while maintaining her own equilibrium. In that moment, he understood the unspoken lesson. Trust wasn't just following blindly. It was relying on someone who had proven themselves in ways he couldn't yet comprehend, had trained him without speaking a word, guiding him through the danger with precision and care. Once across, the team had to simulate a rescue extraction under time pressure. Led decisively, covering movements, signaling silently when threats were near, and calculating the most efficient path to safety. Moved cautiously, absorbing her methods, learning to anticipate rather than react, to plan rather than panic. For the first time, he experienced what it meant to rely on someone else entirely, a lesson in humility, skill, and partnership. By the end of the exercise, the instructors were visibly impressed. Sergeant pulled the pairs aside. "Notice how some of you adapt under pressure and others collapse," he said. "Collins is a model, not because of brute force, but because she understands every variable, every movement, and every outcome before it happens. Observe and learn. That's the difference between surviving and excelling." Standing beside, felt a strange mixture of awe and gratitude. She had guided him through every moment without arrogance or condescension. She didn't need to assert superiority. Her actions, experience, and calm decisiveness spoke louder than words. For the first time, he felt a genuine desire to learn, to match her methodical mastery, rather than compete with her ego. As night fell, the recruits were tasked with a final trust challenge, a blindfolded navigation course through simulated enemy territory. Each recruit relied entirely on their partner's instructions. Blindfolded, had to depend completely on. He followed her commands: step forward, left, pause, climb, duck. Every instruction was precise, perfectly timed, and calculated to minimize risk. The sense of vulnerability was intense. Realized that true operators did not act recklessly. They planned, anticipated, and guided each other through chaos. Halfway through the course, they encountered a simulated ambush with fake gunfire and obstacles. Froze instinctively, panic rising. His voice cut through the chaos, calm and commanding. "Step to the left. Slow, trust me." He obeyed, heart hammering, and they moved through the scenario flawlessly. Every step was a testament to his leadership and skill. Trust in her had shifted from reluctant acknowledgement to complete reliance. When the blindfolds were removed, instructors nodded approvingly. The course had tested nerve, strategy, and trust, had led, guided, and protected throughout without a word of ego or boast. Now understood what he had mocked, underestimated, and doubted, skill measured by results, not appearance or assumptions. He had been humbled and transformed. Later, by the training fire, approached privately. I owe you," he said quietly, voice barely audible over the crackling flames. "I doubted you, mocked you, and I was wrong. You're incredible, not just for what you can do, but for how you lead." Glanced at him, expression calm, almost amused. "Then stop underestimating people," she said simply. "No lectures, no condescension, just truth." Nodded, understanding that trust was earned through action, not words, and that true leadership often required restraint and precision rather than ego. The night ended with recruits reflecting quietly. The trust exercises had accomplished more than testing physical skill. They had revealed character, had not only survived but had guided others through complex challenges, reinforcing that experience, calm under pressure, and silent authority were more valuable than raw strength or arrogance. For the lesson was transformative. He had learned humility, the importance of reliance, and the power of observing and following expertise. For it was another opportunity to sharpen skills, lead without fanfare, and prepare for the inevitable challenges ahead. Real-world mission simulations where stakes would be higher, consequences more severe, and lives dependent on precision and teamwork. Lay awake that night, mentally reviewing every detail of the day, analyzing strengths, weaknesses, and potential improvements. Trust wasn't just about guiding or the team. It was about anticipation, preparation, and instinct honed through countless missions where failure wasn't an option. Each challenge reinforced the principle that mastery was silent, precise, and lethal in its efficiency. Meanwhile, lay awake in a quiet corner of the bunk, reflecting on his transformation. He had witnessed what it meant to lead through action, to guide without ego, and to survive through experience. Had shown him, through silent, calculated dominance, the value of trust, humility, and genuine skill. He no longer laughed. He no longer doubted. He only observed, absorbed, and prepared to follow, learning the lessons of a true operator. By dawn, the training grounds were quiet, but the lessons endured. Trust had been tested, humility achieved, and new dynamics established. Collins had not only led the exercise, she had reshaped perceptions, inspired performance, and taught lessons that extended far beyond the physical realm. And the other recruits now understood the unspoken truth. Operators were not defined by ego or gender, but by precision, skill, and the ability to guide others through chaos. Hell Week had tested the body. The trust exercises had tested the mind and spirit. And Collins had passed both, silently, flawlessly, and unmistakably, setting the stage for the real-world missions and true test of skill that awaited in the next phase. The dawn was thick with fog when Collins and her team were briefed for the first real-world simulation mission. Unlike previous exercises, this one was designed to replicate the intensity of an actual deployment, a hostage extraction in a hostile urban environment. Every detail mattered: timing, precision, communication. Failure wasn't just a mark on a report. It could mean casualty in the simulation, and the instructors made sure the recruits felt the stakes. His team consisted of a mix of surviving recruits, including Mitchell, whose respect for her had grown exponentially over the past weeks. The briefing room was silent, save for the quiet rustle of maps and digital displays. Instructors outlined the scenario. A high-value target had been captured in a compound on a simulated island. The team had to infiltrate undetected, neutralize hostile threats, and extract the hostage safely. Any errors would result in mission failure. Looked at, anxiety etched across his face. He still felt the weight of underestimating her early in training. As always, remained calm, reviewing the map, analyzing the terrain, noting all potential risks. Her past experience in covert operations, the real combat scenarios from which she had accumulated over 300 confirmed kills, gave her an unmatched advantage. Every step of the mission was already mentally mapped in her mind. The insertion began under cover of darkness. The team approached the compound by inflatable boat, the sound of lapping water masked by natural tides. Led silently, signaling with hand gestures and subtle cues. Moved behind her, relying entirely on her guidance. He had learned to trust her instincts, to anticipate rather than react. Every nerve in his body was tense, but he followed without hesitation. The approach to the target was treacherous. Cameras, laser sensors, and simulated guards created a maze of danger. Eyes scanned constantly, calculating trajectories, predicting patrol patterns, and timing movements with precision. Found himself shadowing her, following each motion, each pause, and each silent instruction. It was in controlled chaos. Suddenly, an enemy operative appeared, simulating an unanticipated threat. Reacted instantly, neutralizing the obstacle with a precise, controlled move that showcased her lethal skill without unnecessary aggression. Froze initially, then acted on her subtle cue to cover another flank. The synchronization between them was almost instinctual, a dance honed by experience, trust, and keen awareness. They reached the inner courtyard where the hostage was held. The scenario intensified: multiple simulated guards, tight corners, and limited lines of sight. Signaled the team to split strategically, assigning positions with gestures and whispered instructions. Her voice, calm and commanding, cut through the tension. Rear cover, eyes on the west entrance, trust your position. He nodded, heart racing, feeling the responsibility but also the confidence inspired by precise control. The extraction was tense. Guards advanced, simulated gunfire echoed, and the team moved like a single organism, each member executing their role flawlessly. Training in reconnaissance and sniper tactics became invaluable. She anticipated enemy movements, provided cover when necessary, and guided the team to minimize risk. Now fully relying on her, executed every instruction to perfection. Every decision made was calculated to ensure success while keeping the team intact. The climax came when a simulated breach occurred from the rear, a surprise enemy attack designed to test split-second decision-making. Without hesitation, assessed the threat, neutralized the immediate danger, and redirected the team toward the extraction point. Her movements were precise, efficient, and lethal in their simulation. Following her lead, coordinated defensive positioning, protecting the hostage and reinforcing directives. Within minutes, they reached the extraction point. The hostage was secured, the threats neutralized, and the mission completed successfully. Silence fell over the team as the instructors observed, nodding in approval. The tension gave way to quiet pride. Every recruit understood the gravity of what had just transpired. This was not just a drill, it was a real-world scenario executed flawlessly under pressure. Approached after the simulation, the weight of the experience was evident in his posture. I can't believe how you handled that," he said, voice hushed but reverent. "Every step, every decision, it was perfect. I don't know if I could done that on my own." Looked at him, expression calm, and offered a small, approving nod. "You followed, you executed, you learned. That's progress." The instructors debriefed the team in detail. Performance was highlighted repeatedly, not to glorify her, but to emphasize lessons in observation, calm under fire, and strategic execution. And the other recruits took careful notes, understanding that true operational skill was measured not in ego or aggression, but in precision, timing, and teamwork. Had taught them this lesson through action, not words. Later that evening, as the recruits cleaned their gear and reflected on the day, lingered. "I finally get it," he admitted quietly. "All those missions, the kills, the calmness, I can see why no one underestimates you anymore. You're not just a SEAL recruit. You're something else entirely." Didn't respond immediately, letting him reflect. Then finally she said, "Skill is only dangerous if it's uncontrolled. Experience teaches restraint, patience, and focus. That's the difference between someone who survives and someone who dominates." Nodded, internalizing the lesson. For the first time, he wasn't focused on ego, competition, or proving himself superior. He wanted to learn to match her precision and to embrace the discipline she embodied. His mentorship, silent, precise, and action-oriented, had transformed him from a brash, overconfident recruit into someone capable of observing, executing, and surviving under extreme stress. That night reviewed the mission mentally. Every step, every movement, every threat was cataloged and analyzed. Real-world simulations were invaluable because they tested not just physical skill but tactical thinking, leadership, and the ability to guide others under pressure. She knew the stakes would only increase in the coming phases. Missions with higher stakes, more complex threats, and scenarios requiring full coordination of skill, trust, and precision. For the reflection was different. He lay awake, replaying the mission over and over, acknowledging every error he could have made and marveling at its composure. He had followed, learned, and executed, and he now understood that true strength was not loud or flashy. It was precise, calm, and effective. Had demonstrated all of this and more. The real-world simulation had achieved its purpose. It had tested the recruits' endurance, trust, and operational skill while revealing the depth of Colin's mastery. She had guided her team flawlessly, neutralized threats, and extracted the hostage without hesitation. The instructor's approval was implicit in the lack of criticism. The mission had been a success, and the lesson was clear. Skill, discipline, and experience were more powerful than ego, assumptions, or mockery. By dawn, the recruits knew the unspoken truth. Collins was not merely a participant in the SEAL pipeline. She was the standard, the quiet benchmark by which all others would measure themselves. Once arrogant and dismissive, had been transformed. He now followed not with fear but with respect, eager to learn, to observe, and to emulate the precision and calm that embodied. The next phase of training loomed on the horizon. If the simulated mission had been challenging, the upcoming exercises would push the recruits even further, testing not only physical and mental limits but the true depth of teamwork and operational leadership. As always, was ready. She had survived more than most could imagine, and she had led others through the crucible of both training and simulation. The lessons she imparted, silently yet unmistakably, would resonate long after the final exercises were complete. The final phase of SEAL training had arrived, and with it, a palpable tension hung over the compound. Every recruit who had survived Hell Week, trust exercises, and real-world mission simulations now faced the ultimate evaluation. A week-long combined operation testing all aspects of skill, endurance, leadership, and mental fortitude. For Collins, it was another challenge, but also the opportunity to cement the respect she had quietly earned from instructors and peers alike. For Mitchell, it was the culmination of his own transformation, from arrogant skeptic to a partner who finally understood the depth of her experience. The first day began with a simulated multi-target extraction operation. The recruits were divided into teams and tasked with neutralizing threats, securing high-value targets, and coordinating evacuation under strict time constraints. Assumed command of her squad as usual, not because she demanded it, but because her presence naturally inspired coordination and confidence. The team moved with almost surgical precision under her guidance, their combined skills amplified by her clear, calm instructions. Still adjusting to his new role, Followed's lead closely. He had learned to anticipate her decisions, to watch her subtle cues, and to trust her instinctive planning. When an unexpected obstacle appeared, a simulated armed insurgent lying in wait reacted instantly, neutralizing the threat with flawless timing. Covered the rear, following her guidance to ensure the team remained safe. Every recruit moved as a single unit, the chaos around them orchestrated through silent authority. Over the next several hours, the operation intensified. Recruits faced increasingly complex scenarios, navigating urban environments, avoiding surveillance systems, and rescuing multiple simulated hostages while under continuous simulated fire. Each phase tested mental agility, endurance, and strategic thinking. Excelled in every facet, not just performing her role with near perfection, but also monitoring the team, predicting challenges, and preemptively correcting errors. She didn't seek recognition, but her impact was undeniable. The midweek evaluation focused on survival and tactical improvisation. Recruits were left in a hostile terrain with minimal supplies, tasked with navigating back to base while completing secondary objectives. Exhaustion had taken its toll, and many candidates faltered under the pressure. However, moved with efficiency, conserving energy while maintaining awareness. She demonstrated the subtle art of survival, rationing supplies, identifying safe paths, and improvising tactics when obstacles arose. Following closely, realized the depth of her adaptability. He had witnessed strategy in action, not rehearsed drills, but real-time decisions under extreme conditions. By the fourth day, the instructors introduced a simulated hostage crisis with multiple variables, enemy reinforcements, hidden traps, and environmental hazards. Most teams struggled to coordinate under pressure, fracturing into confusion and panic. Squad, however, moved with near-perfect synchronicity. She delegated roles with subtle hand signals, guided movements with minimal speech, and made split-second decisions that ensured the team's success. Marveled at her capacity to control the situation calmly, even as the simulated environment turned chaotic. The final night brought the ultimate evaluation, an extended mission combining elements of all prior tests. The recruits had to infiltrate a fortified compound, neutralize threats, extract hostages, and retreat under a simulated pursuit, all while maintaining minimal visibility and avoiding detection. This exercise would determine who had truly mastered the skills required to earn the SEAL designation. As led her squad toward the compound under the cover of darkness, she scanned every angle, calculated every risk, and anticipated every move. Shadowed her, fully aware that the lessons he had absorbed over weeks of grueling training were now being put to the ultimate test. This time, hesitation could mean mission failure. As always, remained unflinching. Her past experience, honed through years of high-stakes operations, guided every decision with precision. Inside the compound, chaos erupted. Enemies appeared from multiple directions, alarms blared, and the team had to navigate through tight corridors, stairwells, and improvised traps. Coordinated the squad flawlessly, neutralizing threats with lethal precision while ensuring the safety of simulated hostages. Executed every instruction with newfound confidence, covering areas she designated, observing patterns, and contributing to the success of the mission without second-guessing. When the final extraction point was reached, ensured all simulated hostages were secured and every team member was accounted for. The instructors observed silently, impressed by the seamless execution. The mission, designed to challenge even the most experienced recruits, had been completed with near-flawless precision. Squad stood together, tired but composed, a testament to skill, leadership, and unspoken coordination. The debriefing was profound. Instructors highlighted its calm under fire, tactical foresight, and ability to inspire confidence without dominance. They noted its transformation, from skeptical and arrogant to competent, disciplined, and responsive, a reflection of influence. Her performance was not about ego or recognition. It was about mastery, mentorship, and setting a standard for others to follow. As the formal evaluations concluded, approached privately, I still can't fully believe how you did that, he said, voice quiet but full of respect. Every move, every decision, it was perfect. I learned more from following you than I ever could on my own. Gave a faint smile, placing a hand briefly on his shoulder. You learned because you were willing to observe, to follow, and to trust. That's the difference between surviving and excelling. Never forget it. That night, as the recruits rested, reflected on her journey. From the initial sneers of a dismissive recruit to leading the team through the most grueling simulations imaginable, she had demonstrated not just physical strength, but strategic brilliance, resilience, and the ability to elevate those around her. Her path had been forged through real-world experiences, and now, in the SEAL training pipeline, she had proven herself again, not through recognition, but through flawless execution and unyielding discipline. Lying awake beside his bunk, thought about the journey he had witnessed, had transformed his perception of strength, skill, and leadership. He understood now that true operators were not defined by ego, appearance, or gender, but by mastery, composure, and the ability to guide others under extreme pressure. The lessons she had imparted silently were indelible. The next morning, during the graduation ceremony for the remaining recruits, stood quietly as the SEAL instructors called the names of those who had completed training. She did not seek applause or accolades. When her name was announced, she moved forward with the same calm determination she had shown throughout every phase of training. Along with the other recruits, watched with genuine respect. The applause that followed was not for flashiness, but for skill, resilience, and leadership demonstrated consistently under extreme conditions. Collins had proven herself unequivocally. She had endured Hell Week, led trust exercises, executed real-world simulations flawlessly, and inspired her peers through mastery rather than ego. The journey from underestimated recruit to respected operator was complete. Her legacy, however, extended beyond personal achievement. It was the quiet demonstration that excellence knows no gender, no assumption, and no limitation other than one's own dedication and skill. As the ceremony ended and recruits dispersed, approached her one last time. "Thank you," he said simply. "Not just for teaching me, but for showing all of us what real skill looks like. I won't forget it." Gave him a small nod, her eyes calm and steady. "Good, remember it, and then surpass it." walking away from the compound, reflected on the lessons learned, not just for herself, but for every recruit who had followed her lead. The true measure of an operator was not in boastful claims, accolades, or recognition. It was in precision, resilience, and the ability to guide others through impossible challenges. She had embodied that truth at every step, silently, relentlessly, and flawlessly. In the end, Colin's journey was more than a personal triumph. It was a statement. Excellence transcends assumptions, skill conquers prejudice, and mastery is demonstrated not by words, but by action. And for those who had witnessed it, especially Mitchell, her example would resonate for the rest of their careers. The lessons she imparted would echo far beyond the training grounds, shaping the next generation of operators who would follow in her footsteps. The sun rose on the final day of training, casting light on a woman who had faced doubt, derision, and impossible challenges, and emerged not just victorious, but legendary. Collins, once underestimated, now stood as a benchmark, a mentor, and a symbol of what it truly meant to be a SEAL. Her journey, filled with grit, precision, and unspoken leadership, would be remembered long after the echoes of her confirmed kills had faded into classified history.